Okay, today's lesson for literacy is more information on the Holocaust. So, why did such a tragedy occur? That is what we're talking about. You need to know why it happened, how it started, how Hitler came to power, all those different kinds of things. Your objective is you will be able to identify the events that led to the Holocaust. Success criteria is I can identify thoughts and ideas that led to the Holocaust. I can identify how Hitler came to power. So, Adolf Hitler, under Hitler's government, the Third Reich, the government controlled all parts of one's life. Propaganda was used to brainwash the nation into believing that a perfect Aryan race was needed and all Jews, gypsies, Negroes, or black people, handicapped, mentally ill, homosexuals, and communists should be destroyed in the plan Hitler called the final solution. A series of laws, the Nuremberg Laws, were passed that slowly took away the rights of non Aryan people. So it wasn't a very quick thing. It happened gradually over time. So people kind of got used to it before they went to the next step and added more and added more. So it was a very slow acclimation for people. Um, and that's kind of how Hitler was successful. He just did a little bit at a time. So people were kind of desensitized to the idea of treating these groups differently. Okay, propaganda. Propaganda are messages from the government or media that are biased and they are controversial. So there were comics that supported the idea that the Aryan race was superior to the Jews. This was one of them. Like the guy on the left is an Aryan. He looks strong and fit and, ready to conquer the world. And then this picture of the Jews were businessmen mostly. Um, This guy does not look as desirable looking. He doesn't look as confident. So this is just giving people an idea of the differences between Aryans and Jews, but they weren't necessarily true. This is what Hitler imagined the perfect Aryan would be: lighter hair, um, fair skin. I mean, he has brown hair, but it's not super dark. Okay, you have a pear deck and you have to answer the question on the pear deck. Why do you think people began to agree with Hitler's ideas and rules? Okay, women under Nazi rule. According to Nazi beliefs, a woman's place was in the home. They were to produce babies, bring up children, and care for the home and husband. Women were not allowed to take part in government, the law, or education, so they couldn't be teachers. If women were married and they already were doctors, civil servants like in the government, or teachers, they were fired from their jobs and sent home to take care of their husband and their family. Hitler believed women cannot think logically or reason objectively since they are ruled only by emotions. Women that did not have children were traitors, and women with multiple children were rewarded. Men were told that women they had to marry should have blonde hair, blue eyes, wide open eyes, long oval face, pink and white skin, narrow nose, and a small mouth. So Hitler was so controlling, he even told the men who they could marry. A blonde man cannot marry a brunette, Mediterranean type woman with short legs, hooked nose, full lips, a large mouth, and inclination to plumpness or being a little heavier. So there were very strict rules on who the men could marry. Women under Nazi rule: blonde men should not marry a Negroid type woman with the well known Negroid head and thinnish body. Aryan heroes must marry only his equal Aryan woman, but not one who goes out too much or likes theaters, entertainment, or sports, or who cares to be seen outside her house. So basically, they need to marry an Aryan woman who doesn't go out of the home very often so that her whole life is dedicated to the home and the children and the husband, and who doesn't like to be seen outside her house very often. School curriculum was changed so girls took mainly domestic jobs. They were training all the girls to grow up to be housewives. And women were prevented from going to universities or colleges. The Nazi government condemned makeup, fashion, nail varnish, and slimness. So too skinny. Some cities banned women from wearing pants. Girls' education must be primarily physical education, and only after that, spiritual and mental values should be considered. The one goal to be kept in mind when educating women is that girls someday should be mothers. Boys were taught to be masters of the house. They loved uniforms, smoke, and battle, and they do not play with dolls. So, how do you think Hitler got away with making these rules about women? That's what you need to answer in your Pear Deck. Okay, the Nazi rise to power. This is important. How did they accomplish these things? So from 1933 to 1945, the Nazis were in power. September 15th, 1935, so 2 years after they were in power, that's when the Nuremberg laws began to pass. So it took them a couple years to slowly get people on board with some certain thoughts. And then in 1935, the Nuremberg laws started, but they started small and then took away more and more rights of the Jews. So they stated Jews were no longer considered German citizens. The series of laws took place over several years, and different rights were taken away from Jews. Jews could not marry non-Jewish Germans. Germans were not allowed to do business with Jews. No shopping in Jewish stores. No Jewish lawyers or doctors. Jews had to carry identity cards that were marked with a J for Jude. Jewish children could no longer attend public schools. Jewish teachers and government workers were fired. And in November 1938, Kristallnacht, the night of the broken glass, the Nazis, the secret police, led rioters in burning and destroying synagogues, houses, trains, and shops, still in Jewish hands. So if the Jews were not obeying the laws, they were punished by burning and destroying their property. Jews were thrown from trains and buses, beaten and humiliated, and over 20,000 Jews were arrested, and 72 were killed or seriously wounded. This was an act of terror. This was to make sure everyone was obeying them. This was definitely to keep people afraid. After Kristallnacht, Jews were soon transferred to ghettos and concentration camps. In the beginning, concentration camps were just work or labor camps, and then later, concentration camps became death camps. So Dachau was the first concentration camp established in 1933. Answer this question in your Pear Deck. What do you notice in our society today that separates people into groups? And is there anything that is unfair toward a certain group? Okay, these are some pictures of concentration camps. If you are very sensitive to images of people suffering, then you may want to skip over this. And there's a slide for you to skip in your presentation. At first, camps were slave labor camps, but in 1941, the first death camp was created. So it was about 8 years later before it became a death camp. In Auschwitz, 2,000 people could be killed at one time in large gas chambers, and 5,000 bodies could be burned in one day. So they could kill the people and kind of get rid of the evidence as well. June 6, 1944, Allied forces, that's the people that Germany was fighting against, because it was a world war, so several countries came together to become the Allied forces. They landed in Normandy, and in April of 1945, concentration camps were liberated. So the people who had been put there, the Jews, or the people who were punished for helping Jews, those people were freed, whoever was still alive, in April of 1945. And in May May 8th, 1945, Germany surrendered to the Allies. Okay, so here's your warning. If you need to skip past this, fast forward the video and click this link, it'll take you to slide 24. So this is a picture of Auschwitz. This is the entrance. These were the living quarters. Look how many people were shoved in there. Those are like bunk beds. This is a picture of a gas chamber. So if you see these like pipes, that's how they got the gas into the room, but they had it all closed off so the gas didn't affect anyone else, just the people in the room, and they died in there. Then after they died in there, they would take them to the crematoriums where they would burn their bodies. So if you see this man's body, that is a result of starvation, as well as these bodies are results of starvation. These are people that when they arrived in April of 1945, the people who were still alive looked like this. Okay, 8 stages of genocide. The first stage is classification. That means dividing people into us and them. This is very normal in human society. You guys see it in schools with, the people who are considered athletic, or the nerds, or like the cheerleaders, the popular people, us and them, different groups. It's not a sign that genocide is on the way, but genocide is impossible without an us and a them. It can't happen. Symbolization. Words or symbols are applied to the them. The yellow star that the Jews had to wear under Hitler. There's skin color, classifications on ID cards. Symbolism of human differences is common and not necessarily a sign of genocide. But again, genocide cannot proceed unless there's some distinct way to tell people apart. Okay, dehumanization. The them become social pariahs. They're seen as less than human, as animals or a kind of disease. The Tutsis in Rwanda were called cockroaches before they were killed by the thousands. Killing them was no longer murder. It was just ridding the country of something bad. Dehumanizing words like the bad N-word belong to this step. Unlike the first 2 steps, dehumanization is not commonly found in most societies. It is the first step on the road to genocide. So if you see something like this happening in our society, that is a clue that there's a big problem and that there's about to be a serious attack on a group of people. Organization. To kill people in large numbers, you need organization. Leaders, followers, a chain of command, duties, meetings, guns, training, hate speeches. Sometimes it's the government that does this, but often it is a paramilitary group that seems to be acting on its own. So examples would be the secret police in Nazi Germany, the Ku Klux Klan in America, and the Janjaweed in Darfur. So these groups were acting outside of the government, but sometimes the government is secretly helping the groups, or they're at least turning a blind eye. The killing may start at this stage, but not on a huge scale. Polarization. The first people killed in a genocide are not the pariahs themselves. They're not the group of people targeted, but they're the people in the mainstream who are speaking up for them. So people who spoke up for the Jewish in Germany, they were taken out first, so that the rest of society would not get an idea in their mind that it was wrong to hurt the Jews. Okay, so the voices in the middle are silenced through threats, arrests, or even killings. The message of hate now goes unchallenged. Preparation. The pariahs are often separated from the rest of the country into ghettos, camps, reservations, or some undesirable part of the country. Their property is taken from them. They are not coming back. This step leaves them defenseless. Extermination. This is when the mass killings happen. The genocide is set in motion. Denial means the leaders of the genocide downplay it or tell complete lies denying there was a genocide. As long as they are in denial, the killings can go on. Okay, so when you think of these stages of genocide, which of these stages do you see in our world today? So remember, the first stage of the The grouping, the us and them, that's very normal. The symbolization part is very normal. It's when you get into the next phase, which is the the one that's not normal. And I lost the word for it. When you get into the dehumanization, when someone becomes a social pariah, that's not normal. Okay. So in our society, what stages do you see of genocide in the world today? What about other countries? What about places where refugees come from? Where do you see these things happening? Okay. Here's a timeline of genocide. It's in your Pear Deck. You can read it. Genocide in recent history, all these things you can read on your own. And that is the end of our presentation.